Today, we're going to discuss the history of gender and sexuality, especially in the US, and how they contribute to contemporary forms of patriarchy, heteronormativity, and gender normativity. In an article by Natsuki Aruga entitled History, Comment on the Achievements of Women and Gender History, they ask why there's even a field called Women's and Gender History. They interrogate the question of whether women's history and gender history are, in fact, separate fields. Clearly, defining terms is important, but especially in an academic setting where we want to ensure that we are accurately transferring ideas. For their argument, Aruga makes it clear that women's history entails that of women, while gender's history entails women, men, and those from various gender and sexual categories. This distinction is important to keep in mind for our discussion today. Gender and sex. Well, what is gender anyway? And what is sex? Gender, according to scholars Wade and Ferree, can be thought of as the symbolism of masculinity and femininity that we connect to being male-bodied or female-bodied. Alternatively, male-bodied and female-bodied here then refer to the sex of the body rather than how the person feels or the way they behave, their gender. Ideas about gender are very powerful forces in society because they tend to shape most powerful institutions in society, from family to work to school. These ideas also place arbitrary limits on how we can move through society and within institutions. The thing about gender, though, is that the way gender is performed is always changing. Yes, gender is something that we perform or do. Gender performance. Okay, fair enough. But how do we perform gender? Gender is something we are taught and conditioned through familial and cultural influences to act out. Their existence is a sort of prescription co-signed by society at large for the right or ideal way to behave in various social settings throughout one's life. From the time we are children, those primary agents of socialization, including our families, churches, and schools, which convey to us which gender is allowed to wear, which colors, how to dress, which subjects we should be interested in, what toys we should play with, or what sports we should find fun. This pattern is inescapable, and on an individual level, pervasive throughout all society, all of our lives segregated into unnecessary separate spheres, such as we see with sports or in certain careers. In some cases, gender roles in society can become quite oppressive. Distinction. Gender, it has been theorized, has been used to maintain distinction. Distinction is a tool used in societies to mark one's own group as different from other groups. Distinction is used to create artificial differences between people that allow for a scheme of dominance hierarchies to be achieved throughout society. They are a mechanism for creating and maintaining wealth and power. Without a mechanism for maintaining distinction, the illusion of a false dominance becomes clear. Intersectionality. Intersectionality is a term coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw in the 1990s. She needed a way to help articulate what transpired in a failed legal case where a Black woman was denied her claim for discrimination based on two separate categories. These two categories being a Black woman, Black and a woman. Intersectionality is used to describe the ways in which our multiple overlapping identities, such as class, age, sex, Gender, nationality, ethnicity, or disability status interact to create distinct forms of oppression that individuals must contend with throughout their lives. The matrix of domination. The matrix of domination, also known as the matrix of oppression, is another important framework described by feminist scholar Patricia Hill Collins. Societies are made of institutions that are interlocking, and these systems work together and can be oppressive to individuals based on their social location and intersecting identities. Sex and gender has long been used as a form of oppression within dominant hierarchies found in societies, but race can also play an outsized role in marginalization as well. Using the frameworks of intersectionality and the matrix of oppression together, we can change lenses to zoom in and out to better understand the ways in which sex and gender impact varying demographics in society. Sexual dimorphism. One way this dominance hierarchy is maintained is by attempting to control what people believe. Many Americans believe that there is what scientists call high sexual dimorphism among humans who are assigned male at birth and those who are assigned female at birth. A false appearance of high sexual dimorphism has been intentionally manufactured, policed, and maintained in Western society. It helps maintain the status quo, and well, if we're being honest, company marketing as well. Think products that help hold up the gender binary illusion. Humans have been shown to have relatively few differences between males and females as compared to other species found on the planet. In fact, most of the differences we observe between those who are assigned male at birth and those who are assigned female at birth are the result of statistical outliers rather than normative differences between the sexes. One species that shows a large degree of difference or high sexual dimorphism is the anglerfish. The male anglerfish is many times smaller than the female. He is unable to catch or to digest his own food and must rely on attaching himself to a female for his continued biological survival. Once attached, the male begins to dissolve into the female, leaving his reproductive organs remaining on the outside of the female for her future use. This is just one extreme example within the animal kingdom, which really helps put into perspective just a few of the differences humans have. History of gender. So, what is the history of gender? Well, contrary to Western ideas of only a gender binary, that is, only two possible genders, there have been many more complex understandings of what is natural to humanity. For thousands of years around the world, from the Hijra in India to two spirited people in the Americas to brother boys in Australia, there have been diverse conceptions of what gender is. These conceptions have consisted of up to 5 or more various genders. While in Western societies, we have been taught to think that there are only two possible genders, male masculine and female feminine, other cultures right here in North America have traditionally believed and lived differently. Native American tribes recognize the third and fourth gender, which they call two-spirited people. These people have been described as having both masculine and feminine characteristics. A fifth conception of gender within U.S. Native American tribes is the gender fluid Nadlihi. Individuals possessing this gender are understood to alternate between the gender of two-spirit, man or woman, with changes as frequently as every minute. This is unremarkable behavior within these cultures. European colonization. So, what happened to the knowledge of expression of these additional gender identities within the Americas? Well, in other parts of the Americas, we can still see that additional genders are accepted as part of the culture. However, in the United States, we underwent a period of European colonization. Genocide was committed against the natives of this land, and those who were left were forced to convert or assimilate to the Western culture as a matter of survival. Any overt acts or expressions of Native culture and practice could be a deadly act of violence. Excuse me, could be seen as a deadly act of resistance. This underscores the push for a heteronormative society from the foundation of our country. Heteronormative means that we just assume that everybody is heterosexual and we are all ascribed that status unless there is a reason that flags us to be otherwise. The patriarchy. Along with European colonization, the patriarchy came to the United States. The patriarchy can be defined as rule by the father or eldest male in societies over women, children, and younger men. These gender roles situated women in a subjugated realm where they were the property of their husbands, with no rights of their own to earn and keep their own wages, to vote, or to own their own property. Women were also transferred as property from their fathers to their husbands upon marriage in a sort of contract. These these societal forms dehumanize women to such a degree that if they are raped before marriage, the only damage done is essentially considered to be damage to goods. No account is taken for the natural or human rights of women under such circumstances. It's important to remember that this is the actual history and foundation that underlies the contemporary United States, and it is not so far behind us. Gender performance and normativity. The way in which individuals have traditionally been allowed to do gender in the United States are still impacting how we behave in the present day, whether through normative tradition or slave women used to be in charge of agriculture production. This has shifted today to a more masculine role. In another shift, we know that during the Victorian era, there were swings in cultural views about how women ought to raise their children. At the beginning of the era, it was frowned upon to coddle children too much. However, later, as society began to change and we moved to commodification and industrialization, men and women began to shake up their roles, oftentimes due to sheer convenience, strategy, or necessity. During the Victorian era, women's contributions to society were seen as less valuable, and as such, more emphasis was placed on cultivating children to help preserve women's perceived value. The big idea during the Victorian era was essentially this: a good mother should more or less cast aside her needs and desires, all to the benefit of her children. Her life should no longer be her own. Instead, she is now eternally dedicated to her role as a mother. Men, on the other hand, during this time, were expected to be good providers for their family and had a much lower to no expectation for childbearing responsibilities. Gender normativity. While contemporary Western cultures continue to evolve and change their thinking about what gender is, one thing is clear. Within society as a whole, there exists a continued default understanding that there are still just two opposite feminine, and feminine female genders, and that these are the two options under which everyone must fall. People go so far as to continue to police gender to ensure the continuance of the extant gender order. Not only men, but women too make patriarchal bargains that allow them to take advantage of their social location. Part of that is ensuring the perpetuation of the existing hierarchy. This means that men may perform gender roles in ways they disagree with on a moral or personal level in exchange for the status and benefits of doing so. Why care? So, why should you care about all this sex and gender stuff anyway? Especially if it doesn't seem to affect you in any way. Well, the truth is, we live in a highly interconnected world. Recognize that gender and its effects are likely affecting you in positive and negative ways that you are unaware of. Whether that's subconsciously preventing you from playing the clarinet you've always wanted to play because it's a girl's instrument and you're a manly man, or perhaps you are a woman who is thinking about joining the military, but you don't know why you have so much internalized doubt. Whatever your social location, you can rest assured that in some way, gender is having an outsized impact on your life. Another reason to understand why these social issues is having Another reason to understand these social issues is that having empathy for others helps foster understanding and build bridges, something sorely lacking in contemporary society. With that in mind, I would like to share two stories about how I've witnessed people suffer from a lack of understanding and acceptance in society about sex and gender. Meet Mr. X. In my early 20s, I dated a young man, and we'll call him Mr. X. X, who had grown up in a very different home environment from most people, especially in the late 1980s and 90s. X was lucky enough to have had two dads instead of having just one parent or two cisgendered parents. While I had an open mind and found this intriguing, I could immediately tell it was a source of pain and internal conflict for Mr. X. As time passed, I was able to find out why this area of his life was so painful. X was young when his parents divorced. Later, his father married another man who happened to have passed away from complications of AIDS. And that was at a time before we had life saving treatment. Before his death, however, my friend was bullied at school because of his two fathers. X actually loved both of his dads, but the relentless bullying led to intense internal conflict and problems at home. The teasing from the other children and the comments from unapologetic adults led Mr. X to intensely question the nature of his otherwise loving family dynamic. Before X's two dads could live a long and happy life together, simply as two people who were in love, one was tragically stripped away by a horrible disease that devastated the gay community. Had we lived in a more open and accepting society, I believe this loving family could have been spared years of grief. They could have enjoyed the time they had together more, and Mr. X could have grown up making more cherished memories instead of developing an internal dialogue that made him constantly question his own sexuality and gender because society told him from a young age that somehow the gay might rub off. Wolf. The last example I would like to leave you with is a story about a young man I like to think of as the son I never had. We'll call him Wolf. Circa 2013, my daughter was transitioning from middle school to high school. We had just moved to a new part of town, and she was changing schools. She quickly found some new friends and, well, what we thought was a new boyfriend. When I asked to learn more about this young man, I quickly learned that she had been warned by the other kids on the school bus that Wolf might be gay because of how they used to appear and carry themselves. She assured me that at some point in the last couple of years, though, he had changed his ways. No doubt this was due to constant gender policing, but he was no longer appearing quite as effeminate. And here I use both of their pronouns, he and they, out of respect. As relationships quickly come and go during these formative years, I learned that the two were breaking up. My daughter was utterly devastated. When I was finally able to find out why, it was because Wolf had come out to her as gay. Indeed, Wolf is two spirited. For a young girl who thought she had found her first love, it was hard to process how her boyfriend could be having mixed feelings about his attraction for her, along with other inclinations. Can you imagine the blow to her self esteem? This was coupled with the fact that social pressure was used to relentlessly bully Wolf into thinking that they must conform with heteronormativity. These are just social pressures that our kids don't need, and we can do something to change them. I believe that if we created a culture that is inclusive of gender, sexual minorities, many people could have been spared unnecessary emotional and physical pain in both my examples. It is my sincere hope that with sharing these stories, someone will be motivated to think twice about judging people for something they cannot fully understand. Conclusion. Perhaps this should be enough for all of us to recognize that we are here for a finite amount of time, and we are all collectively having a human experience that is unique to us. In the final analysis, no one can go on your life's journey with you the entire way. No, we must go it alone. But we can make choices every day about how we get there. Worldwide, people still die from suicide and hate crimes related to gender and sexuality. With that sobering fact in mind, let's all make a conscious effort to move forward in life with more empathy, an open mind, and understanding for individuals having a human experience that is just as legitimate as your own, but just a little bit different. Remember, it doesn't cost you anything to act with kindness. Thank you.